Hello guys, now we are going to revise the audit sampling chapter number 7. ESA 530 deals with the audit sampling, right? Now, what do we mean by audit sampling? Audit sampling means refer to the application of audit procedure to less than 100% of item within a population relevant under the audit, so that all the sampling unit have a equal chance of selection. Now, this is to ensure that the items selected represent the entire population, which enable the auditor to draw conclusion and express his opinion based on a predetermined objective. ऑडिट प्रोसीजर को लेस देन 100% ऑफ आइटम विद इन पॉपुलेशन ऑफ ऑडिट रिलेवेंस में अप्लाई करना है और उसके बेस पे कंक्लूजन ड्रॉ करना है पूरा पॉपुलेशन पर, ठीक है। जैसे कि फॉर एग्जांपल 10,000 ट्रांजैक्शन आइटम है, 10,000 आइटम पॉपुलेशन हो गया और इसका 1200 आइटम सैम्पलिंग यूनिट हो गया, ठीक है। Once again, we are going to revise the meaning of audit sampling. What do you mean by audit sampling? According to ESA 530, audit sampling refer to the application of audit procedure. Audit procedure, there are different type of audit procedure you apply during audit, like inspection, observation, inquiry, and this audit procedure is to be applied to within the less than 100% of item within a population relevant under the audit, so that all sampling unit have equal chance of selection. This is to ensure that items selected represent the entire population, which enable the auditor to draw conclusion and express his opinion based on predetermined objective, right? What are the scope of year 530? Statistical sampling and non-statistical sampling. It's very important. We are going to discuss further. Right now we are going to see the population. What is the definition of population? Population refers to the entire set of data from which a sample is selected and about which the auditor wishes to draw conclusion. In here 1200 unit is selected from 10,000 unit, then 10,000 unit it refers to population. Same population refer to the entire set of data from which sample is selected and about which the auditor wishes to draw conclusion, right? Now, what are the characteristics of population? Key code is CAR. C for characteristic, C for completeness, characteristic completeness, A for appropriateness, R for reliable. One more time, guys. Characteristic of population: completeness, appropriateness, reliable. Population. What are the type of characteristic of population? Then three answers, three keywords should be given: completeness, accurate, and reliable. Right? Why completeness is important? Because it should be complete in all aspects that conclusion drawn on the population will be considered to be reasonable. And why appropriateness is important for characteristic of population? Because appropriate means population from which the sample are drawn should be relevant for the specific objective under audit. This is because when the sample are drawn, the audit procedure are applied on the sample and conclusion are projected on the population, right? So appropriateness is equally important. Now reliable. Why characteristic of population need to be reliable? Because it provides complete and accurate audit evidence. So if question comes in exam, what are the characteristics of population, then you should need to write completeness, accurate, appropriateness, and reliable. You should need to write completeness, appropriateness, reliable, right? Now, what are the approaches to sampling? There are two approaches of sampling: statistical sampling and non-statistical sampling, right? In a statistical sampling, it is an approach to sampling that has a random selection of sampling item. It is an approach of sampling that has a random selection of the sample item. It is drawn from a random number table. The use of probability theory to evaluate sample result, and the use of probability theory including measurement of sampling risk characteristic. If statistical sampling comes, then you need to write characteristic of a statistical sampling approach. There are three characteristic of a statistical sampling approach. An approach to sampling that has a random selection of the sample item. It is drawn from the random number table. Then the use of probability theory to evaluate the sample result, and the use of probability theory including measurement of sampling risk characteristic. Now we need to write, is it a statistical sample more scientific? Yes, it is more scientific because it is done from the random number table, and its use of probability theory to evaluate the sample result, right? You need to write the same answer, what the characteristic of a statistical sampling here. And what do you mean a non-statistical sampling? In non-statistical sampling, auditor use his own personal experience and knowledge of the auditor, right? Here personal experience will determine the size of the sample and express it in terms that number of pages or personal account in the purchase or sales ledger to be checked. For example, March, June and September may be selected in year 1 and different month would be selected in the next year on the basis of value of item, top 10 highest value etc. An item would be avoid establishing a pattern of selection year after year. That is the way of selecting sample to maintain an element of surprise as to what auditor is going to check. It is a common practice to check large number of items toward the close of the year so that adequacy of cut-off procedure can also be determined. Also because year-end transactions are prone to high risks of misappropriation, and non-statistical sampling is criticized on the ground that it is neither objective nor scientific. The expected or degree of objectivity cannot be assured in non-statistical sampling. Degree of objectivity cannot be assured in non-statistical sampling because of risks of personal bias in selection of sample item cannot be eliminated. There is involvement of human, so there is risk of personal bias in selection of sample item, so its risks cannot be eliminated. The closeness of quality projected by sample result is determined with the mathematically based statistical technique, right? So you can read accordingly. If the question come, it is very important question for your exam point of view. What are the factors that should be considered for deciding upon the extent of checking on the sampling plan? The following 5 points are discussed here. The factor that should be considered for deciding upon the extent of checking on sampling plan, keyword is tricks. Keyword is tricks, right? मतलब mnemonics is trick. T4 toll level error range, R4 adequacy and reliability of book and record, I4 state of the internal control, C4 degree of desired confidence, C4 degree of desired confidence, S4 size of the organization under audit, T4 toll level error range, E4 degree of, E4 R4 adequacy and reliability of book and record, I4 state of the internal control, C4 degree of the desired confidence, S4 size of the organization under audit. Right, the factor that should be considered for deciding upon the extent of checking on sampling plan, its answer is tricks. T4 tolerable error range, R4 adequacy and reliability of book and record, I4 state of the internal control, C4 degree of the desired confidence, S4 size of the organization under audit. Right, what are the appropriateness of sampling approach? What are the advantages of statistical sampling? This is also very important question, and its keyword is better calculate amount for sample. Better calculate amount for sample selection. Better calculate amount for sample selection. Better it may provide a better description of large mass of data than a complete examination of all data, since non-sampling error such as processing and clerical mistake are not as large, it is small in nature. So it may provide a better description of large mass of data than a complete examination of all the data, since non-sampling error such as processing and clerical mistake are not as large, right? So better से आ गया better description of large mass of data. Now calculate से आ गया, it provide a means for deriving a calculated risk and corresponding precision, that is the probable difference in result due to the use of sample in lieu of examining all the record in the group using the same audit procedure, right? And amount से आ गया, amount of testing doesn't increase in the proportion to increase in the size of the area universe tested. The amount of testing doesn't increase in the proportion to the increase in the size of the area tested, right? Better calculate amount for sample selection. Calculate it provide a means for deriving a calculated risk and corresponding precision, that is the probable difference in result due to the use of sample in lieu of examining all the record in the group using the same audit procedure. EM से आ गया, the method provide a means of estimating the minimum sample size associated with a specific risk and precision. वो से आ गया, sample selection is more objective and thereby more defensible, right? The advantage of statistical sampling, if it comes, then better calculate amount for sample selection should be rotating in your mind. Better it provide better description of large mass of data than a complete examination of all the data, right? Calculate it provide a means for deriving a calculated risk and corresponding precision, that is the probable difference in result due to the use of sample in lieu of examining all the record in group using the same audit procedure. फिर आ गया amount of testing doesn't increase in proportion of the increase in the size of the area tested. Amount of testing doesn't increase in the proportion to the increase in the size of the area tested. For sample selection, for sample, the method provide a means of estimating the minimum sample size associated with a specified risk and precision. O से आ गया, the sample selection is more objective and thereby more defensible. The sample selection is more objective and thereby more defensible, right? Now here comes what are the what are the factor that should be considered by for designing sample. Then these 3 points should be 3 points should be taken care of. First of all, auditor consideration include the specific purpose to be achieved and combination of the audit procedure that is likely to best achieve that purpose. Second point, consideration of the nature of audit evidence sought and possible deviation or misstatement, condition or other characteristic relating to that audit evidence will assist the auditor in defining what constitute a deviation or misstatement and what population to use for sampling. In fulfilling the requirement of ESA 500 audit evidence, when performing audit sampling, auditor performs audit procedure to obtain evidence that the population from the audit sample is drawn is complete. Right? There are these 3 factors while considering the sample designing. Now, if, how much sample size is selected? If there is higher rate of deviation, then large sample size need to be selected. If there is tolerable rate of deviation is not exceeded by actual rate of deviation in the population, will increase the sample size. Tolerable rate of deviation is not exceeded by the actual rate of deviation in the population, will increase the sample size, right? And in one condition there will be negligible effect on the sample size. In which condition? In case of a large population, the actual size of the population has a little. In a large population, the actual size of population has little, if any, effect on the sample size. For a small population, however, audit sampling may not be efficient as alternative means of obtaining sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Right? The great reliance on the auditor plays on the operating effectiveness of control in the risk assessment. The greater is the extent of the auditor test of control. Now, what are the example of factor influencing sample size for test of detail? What are the example of factor influencing sample size for test of detail? The higher the auditor assessment of the risk of metal ROM, the higher the auditor assessment of the ROM, the larger the sample size need to be. If higher the auditor assessment of ROM, the larger sample size need to be, right? To detect the misstatement. And the more the auditor is relying on other substantive procedure, the smaller the sample size should be. The more the auditor is relying on other audit procedure, the smaller the sample size can be. There will be more than one audit procedure to obtain audit evidence to form an opinion, right? An increase in the auditor desired level of assurance will increase the sample size. An increase in tolerable misstatement will decrease the sample size. Increase in tolerable misstatement will decrease the sample size. The greater the amount of misstatement the auditor expects to find in the population, the larger the sample size need to be in order. The greater the amount of misstatement the auditor expects to find in the population, the larger the sample size need to be in order. Right? When stratification of the population is appropriate, then sample size will decrease. And there will be negligible effect on sample size due to number of sampling unit in the population. For large population, the actual size of the population has little, and if any effect on a sample size. Thus, for a small population, audit sampling is often not as efficient as alternative means of obtaining sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Right? Now, what are the different sample selection method? There are many sample selection method. There are five type of method. One is random selection method. Second one is systematic sampling. Third one is monetary unit sampling. Fourth one is haphazard sampling. Fifth one is block sampling. In random sampling, you pick it in a random way, like 1 3 4 5 6 9 10 15 18 19. You can pick up 1 4 5. And in systematic sampling, 1000 per divided by 100, every 10th of the unit you will be selected. In monetary unit sampling, every unit is measured in the monetary way. In haphazard sampling, there is no any systematic way to select the sample. In block sampling, you will select the number of block, like 1 to 5000 and 5000 to 10,000. In this way, there are 5 way of selecting the sample: random sampling, systematic sampling, monetary unit sampling, haphazard selection, and block sampling. Right? Now let's move on, guys. in sampling risks, if there are in sampling risks, there are two type of erroneous conclusion: over reliance and under reliance, right? There are two type of sampling risks. One is over reliance and another is under reliance. When there is over reliance, when in the case of test of control, the control are more effective than they actually are. When test of control, the control are more effective than they actually are. Or in case of test of detail, the material misestimate doesn't exist when in fact it does. The audit is primarily concerned with this type of erroneous conclusion because it affects audit effectiveness and is more likely to lead an inappropriate audit opinion. This is because of over reliance on internal control. In case of test of control, the control are less effective than they actually are. Or in the case of test of detail, that a material misestimate exists when in fact it doesn't. This type of erroneous conclusion affect audit efficiency, as it would usually lead to additional work to establish that initial conclusion were incorrect. This is because of under reliance on test of control and detail or substantive procedure. Right? Now let's move on, guys. What are the sources of non-sampling risks? What do you mean by non-sampling risks? In हिंदी आई हैव रिटेन हियर, जो रिस्क आप सैम्पलिंग के कारण नहीं है, आपके ऑडिट प्रोसीजर के कारण है, इसलिए नॉन सैम्पलिंग रिस्क होता है. ठीक है, इंग्लिश में देख लेते हैं. द रिस्क दैट ऑडिटर इज एन इरोनियस कंक्लूजन फॉर एनी रीजन नॉट रिलेटेड टू सैम्पलिंग रिस्क. The risk that auditor reaches an erroneous conclusion for any reason not related to sampling risks. What are the sources of non-sampling risks? Human mistake, misinterpreting the sample result, applying audit procedure not appropriate to the objective of audit, relying on erroneous information, that is erroneous confirmation. These are the four type of sources of non-sampling risks. One is human mistake, another is misinterpreting the sample result. You misinterpret the sample result, or applying audit procedure where it is not appropriate to use the audit procedure for to achieve the objective of audit, right? And you rely on erroneous information, that is erroneous confirmation, right? Now, performing audit procedure. How you perform audit procedure? If audit shall perform audit procedure appropriate to the purpose on each item selected. On each item selected, different audit procedure can also be done. So, the audit shall perform audit procedure appropriate to the purpose on each item selected. If audit procedure is not applicable to the selected item, the auditor shall perform the procedure on a replacement item. What do you mean by replacement item? Like you take a confirmation on 100 item, but 98 item confirmation received, 2 item confirmation not received. Then you assume yourself that two item you pick up and you form an opinion on 2 item. That is known as replacement item. If auditor is unable to apply the designed audit procedure or suitable alternate procedure to a selected item, the auditor shall treat that item as a deviation from the prescribed control. In case of test of control or a misstatement, in case of test of details, right? You can read it by yourself. This is so easy. And what are the nature and causes of deviation and misstatement? There may be some common feature, that is, for example, type of transaction, location, product line or period of item. Common feature is one of the reason for cause of deviation and misstatement. In such circumstances, auditor may decide to identify all items in the population that possess the common feature and extend audit procedure to those items. In addition, such deviation or misstatement may be intentional and may indicate the possibility of fraud, right? Now, therefore, auditor shall investigate the nature and causes of any deviation or misstatement identified, evaluate their possible effect on the purpose of the audit procedure and on other area of the audit. In the extremely rare circumstances, when the auditor considers a misstatement or deviation discovered in a sample to be an anomaly, the auditor shall obtain a high degree of certainty that such misstatement or deviation is not representative of the population. In extremely rare circumstances, when the auditor considers a misstatement or deviation discovered in a sample to be an anomaly, the auditor shall obtain a high degree of certainty that such misstatement or deviation is not representative of the population. What do you mean by anomaly here? Anomaly may be defined as a misstatement or deviation that is demonstrably not representative of misstatement or deviation in a population. You select a sample on a population. You select a sample. That sample may be anomaly. because that doesn't represent the misrepresentation, that doesn't represent the misstatement or deviation of the population, right? So, in extremely rare circumstances, when auditor consider misstatement or deviation discovered in a sample to be an anomaly, the auditor shall obtain a high degree of certainty that such misstatement or deviation is not representative of the population. Auditor shall obtain this degree of certainty by performing additional audit procedure to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence that the misstatement or deviation doesn't affect the remainder of the population. The auditor shall obtain a degree of certainty by performing additional audit procedure to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence that the misstatement or deviation doesn't affect the remaining balance of the population, right? एंड इवेल्युएटिंग द रिजल्ट ऑफ ऑडिट सैम्पलिंग, जो आपने रिजल्ट निकाला है, आपको पूरा रिजल्ट को एवेल्युएट करना है. जो आपने रिजल्ट निकाला है उस पे आपको पूरा रिजल्ट पे एवेल्युएट करना है, सो एज टू डिटरमाइन क्या ये मेरा पॉपुलेशन में पे अप्लाई कर सकता हूँ. रिजल्ट ऑफ द सैम्पलिंग व्हेन द यूज ऑफ ऑडिट सैम्पलिंग हैज प्रोवाइड अ रीजनेबल बेसिस फॉर कंक्लूजन अबाउट द पॉपुलेशन दैट हैज बीन टेस्टेड, राइट. And in for test of control, it is very important this point. When the projected misstatement plus anomalous misstatement, if any, exceed tolerable misstatement, the sample doesn't provide a reasonable basis for conclusion about the population that has been tested. The closer the projected misstatement plus anomalous misstatement is to be tolerable misstatement, the more likely the actual misstatement in the population may exceed tolerable misstatement. इसे मैंने हिंदी में लिख लिया है. छोटी छोटी गलती मिल के मेटेरियलिटी को क्रॉस कर सकती है. उस पे परफॉर्मेंस मेटेरियलिटी पे निकालना है कि नहीं निकालना होती है. ठीक है फ्रेंड्स. नाउ by applying this audit sampling, auditor may request management to investigate misstatement that have been identified and potential for further misstatement, and to make any necessary adjustment or to tailor the nature, timing and extent of those further audit procedure to best achieve the required assurance. For example, in case of test of control, auditor might extend the sample size, test an alternative control, or modify related substantive procedure, right? This is your whole revision of audit sampling. I hope you enjoy the video. Please like the video. Thank you.